Hey everyone, sorry I'm late. I tried to make it earlier, but I just couldn't make it. Let me see if somebody is listening. Make it earlier, but I just couldn't make it. Let me see if somebody is listening. Make it earlier, but I just couldn't make it. Let me see if somebody is. Okay. Great. Let me. Where's the chat? How do I? Okay, say something. Hi everyone, sorry I'm late, I apologize. Please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, now I'm also going to go to the Piazza site and see if there were any questions there. Okay. Okay, so first question here, I'm looking at Piazza right now. Question, why am I not here? So sorry about that again. I had something I couldn't get out of, unexpected. And I was not able to make it to the scheduled time. Again, sorry for that. Okay, a question here from David Moore. Are the exam questions all weighted equally? Or if not, will the weight points for each question be listed on the exam? So I will, yes, I will mention the weighting of the different questions. Quite possibly questions will have different weights, but I will mention them. So I'm also entering here to the post. I will mention the weights of the different questions in the exam when I post the exam. Okay, so next question from Piazza. Is a second computer allowed as a resource? I have R&R Studio with all the appropriate packages installed. ProctorTrack requires Windows or OS X, and he wants to use a different machine to take the test. He wants to use the Linux for the R-related coding questions. So Anurag already answered, and I think that makes sense. So I'd rather focus, by the way, in these office hours more on the contents of the exam rather than logistics. I asked Anurag and so I asked a couple of TAs to focus on the logistics. It's probably best to ask them, and you can also email me if you have any questions, and I'll CC the TAs. The TA here responded that the answer, unfortunately, is no. And I think that's probably okay. If you have Mac or Windows, you can just create RStudio there. I'll try not to give, like, if at all there will be any R questions, they're not going to be like super involved with very little time. So that's not my goal. Is not to test whether you're a really good programmer. Okay, that's not my goal. So keep that in mind. I don't think that is likely to be a problem if you are not comfortable with Windows or Mac and you have to use it for a little bit. I think that should be fine. Let's do one more question from Piazza. Having a difficult time in understanding the theory of Lasso and Ridge Estimator, can you suggest any books or online resources for it? So there is a book called Statistical. What is it called? Statistical Learning, or maybe Statistical Learning by Hastie and a bunch of other people. Elements of Statistical Learning. Yeah, so I'll post the link to it. Elements of statistical learning. I'm right now, what I'm doing is I'm responding to posts on Piazza. And that book has a good overview of Lasso and Ridge, including the theory behind it. And they have reference there to more details if you want even more details. I think that book, by the way, is freely available on the web, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, let's go back to the YouTube, see if there are any questions on YouTube. Have you decided on the time length of the exam? It will be upper bounded by 3 hours, so not more than that for sure. I'm still debating whether it will be 2 hours or 3 hours. And I'll let you know maybe a day or two before, but given the fact that I'm not going over 3 hours, I don't think that's going to be a huge problem if you don't know it ahead of time. Because of the worst case, you'll have a pleasant surprise and you can reclaim 1 hour of your time. So wait a few more days and I'll let you know right before the exam if that's going to be 2 hours or 3 hours. Okay. So I can write here, we'll let you know right before the exam length. Worst case will be 3 hours, possibly 2. Okay, what's the next question? During the exam, do we need to download any file from ProctorTrack and work on it in RStudio? I may ask you some, I think I mentioned that earlier, there's a chance I'll ask you some R questions. I'm not committing to it. There may not be any R code questions, but if there are, you don't have to use RStudio. You can just type the code. You can use R application window or the Linux R prompt, or you can use RStudio. So whatever is the most convenient to you. I will not ask you to write a very complex and long piece of code. That my goal is not to test how good of an R programmer you are. But if I can think of a really good question that tests your understanding of data science through the use of R, I will ask that. Now, I have to say I'm actually I'm not super excited about giving you R questions for the reason that you had plenty of R questions in the project 1, project 2, and the homeworks. So I feel like I already asked you a lot of questions in R, and so the exam may not have any R questions, but I still reserve to write. There may be R questions. I don't want to say upfront that for sure there won't be any. But my initial feeling is it's not like oh, I'm gonna have an exam that's heavy on coding and R, because that's what the project 1, project 2 homeworks were about. So if there is something about programming or R, it's not going to be the majority or the main part of the test. Okay, what else? If the goal is not to program in R, what is your approach to the exam in general? Is it to test what we learned in class, or is it to extrapolate what we learned in class? A very good question. To be honest, I usually in exams like to ask about your understanding, so not repeat the definition of locally constant regression, or how do you define the box plot size and whiskers and all that, the size of the box and the whiskers. That's not, in my opinion, the best exam, because you can just look it up, and it's a question of memorization. What I'd like to test is your understanding of the concepts. And to test your understanding, I probably need to ask something that goes beyond just what was it? What is this definition or this concept? So I'm going to try to ask you some questions in your language that extrapolate beyond, you know, the narrow material that I mentioned in class, and try to see how well you understand that material. And that's my general, and I'm not saying every question will be like that, but that's my general philosophy for evaluating students. I think that makes sense, especially in a graduate course to do that. Let's go back to Piazza. Actually, let me answer an email here. I'm going to say something in the chat. More towards asking questions about asking questions, testing the internal understanding rather than superficial memorization, which sounds like your sense of extrapolation. Okay, let me go back to Piazza and see what else is on Piazza. More of a note than a question. If you're required that we take pictures to drive some formulas, please let us know beforehand. Generally, I enter exam area with no devices, as ProctorTrack usually requires. I don't want my cell phone ringing during the exam, for example. I'm happy to let you know right before the exam, but also keep in mind, I think I mentioned that in one of the posts. If I'm going to ask you to do that, you'll have a little bit of extra time to take the photos and upload them to T-Square, so you can finish your ProctorTrack, and let's say you have 3 hours, or 2 hours. So I'm going to give you like an extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes to get your device and take a picture and upload the picture. It's going to take a few minutes, so I don't want you to take that time out of your exam time, and I also don't want you to get in trouble with ProctorTrack. So if that happens, the submission of that part of the test, the photo, will be outside of ProctorTrack, and it's fine. I'm going to mention specifically the time constraints, but it's fine if it's 5 or 10 minutes after the ProctorTrack timing expires. But I think that's a reasonable request, and I don't mind, like a day before, let's say, I'm going to post on Piazza a little bit more information on the exam. So not a lot more, but I'm going to say a little bit more maybe. And I don't want to say it early, because if I say it early, everyone will start preparing for the exam in a narrow sense. Like, let's say suppose I say you're not gonna need to take photos of math formulas. So don't worry about a cell phone and taking photos. And everybody follows up by not preparing for that. And that's not my goal, because I want you to prepare in a comprehensive way, because I think preparation for the exam is a good way to review the material. So I don't want to give any tips at this point. Prepare for everything, but I'm okay a day before the exam. I'll let you know a little bit more information about that. Okay, one more question. So I write here, we'll do a day before the exam. Now prepare for any kind of question. I'm doing that on purpose, not because I'm lazy. Okay, so what's the next one? I may have missed this in all the notes on the final exam, but what is the duration of the exam? So the duration of the exam will be max 3 hours, possibly less. If it's less, I will let you know right before and in the exam 4. Will the exam be out of a total of 100? Yes, out of 100. Will we know the distribution of points of the exam questions to be able to time ourselves? Yes. We'll let you know the weights of the questions. Okay, next question. Logistics question. Can I hook my monitor to laptop? Does ProctorTrack work with only single screen? So in general, for logistics question, please ask the two TAs that posted about logistics of the exam. But I think the answer is no. You need to work with a single screen. And I think that's on purpose. ProctorTrack does it on purpose to try to prevent cheating. And to be honest, I don't think it's a huge allowance to make or a huge problem, because like I said, I'm not going to ask you to write large pieces of code very quickly. Single screen, I think. Let's ask the PAs that handle logistics of exam. Okay. How is it that, let me just a second. How is it that Lasso L1 penalty encourages sparse solutions while the L2 penalty does not? If the expression for Lasso, the argmax term, returns the theta independently of the value of lambda theta 1. No, so obviously the solution of Lasso depends on lambda. And the reason is that geometrically the theta 2 penalty looks like a box instead of a square. And when you have a box kind of penalty, it kind of forces the parameter to be on the axis, which means sparsity. So it's a little bit tricky to explain, but I'm happy to try to do that offline. Why don't you, it's kind of too long for now for this office hours. Also, I want to focus on the exam. So why don't you, this is a comment to Neil, post a comment on this on Piazza, and we'll try to have a thread on how to make that more intuitive. The short answer, please post on Piazza and have a discussion thread on it. Okay, now a question for Anurag, one of the TAs. Is it possible we can access a USB drive from the machine we're taking the test? Is this allowed or will it be flagged? So I don't know. Hopefully you can try it out in the test exam. That's one of the reasons we have the test exam. If you can't, then I hope Anurag will answer, maybe let you know. Okay, let's go back to the YouTube. Were there any more questions? Do you think a table of derivative would be necessary for the exam? Oops. So again, in the context of not tipping my hand, because I don't want you to prepare, let's say if I say no, you're going to prepare mostly for coding. I want you to prepare in a comprehensive manner. I'm sorry if that's not what you expect. You'd like to prepare more narrowly, but I'd rather not give too much hints at this point. So basically the answer is perhaps. And if you want to be prepared for that, if you think that's helpful for you, you don't remember the easy derivation, the standard derivations, then yeah, prepare a table. I'm not going to ask like things that you need a very kind of like, you know, derivations that are not that common. But standard, they're like, we know how to differentiate a log or how to differentiate a ratio or whatever. I expect you to know that, and if you need to write it down somewhere, write it down somewhere and have it available. I'd rather not kind of say now if you're gonna need it or not. It's not to cause people to prepare on. Actually, that's what I did with the questions on the test exam. If you look at the test exam, these are questions that I think are reasonable to give in the exam as well. There are only a couple, but you can look at these if you want to get a sense for what the questions could be. Of course, you could also have questions on coding or math, etc. So, but yeah, I gave you 2 in the test exam, so I would look at these as well. Will there be a healthy mix of derivatives and essay questions? I have nightmares about a sea of questions on derivatives. There may be some, so I may ask you to differentiate something. So you probably want to have some formulas ready in case you need them, if you don't remember the basic rules. But yeah, I'm not going to expect you to do like a lot of math. If there will be a math question, I'm not going. The exam is not going to be mostly just kind of differentiated. I don't want to test your ability to do calculus. So if there will be some examples on derivatives or whatever, it's not going to be the majority. I don't want to test your knowledge of calculus, and I don't want to test your knowledge as an R programmer. So you can take this in whichever way you want, but I don't want to give, you know, an overly specific answer. There aren't going to be any questions with derivatives, and there are going to be one small questions on coding. I don't want to do that because, like I said, I want you to prepare in a comprehensive way so that you get a really good review of all the material. So just to repeat one comment that I said before, I will prepare a post on Piazza a day before the start date of the exam with a little bit more information. But for now, I don't want to give too much information what the questions will be like, if they're going to be with programming or without. I'm happy, by the way, to answer more questions on Piazza. If you have, just put up posts or send me emails. If you have logistics questions, email the TAs or put it on Piazza. And if for some reason you don't get response, always feel free to send me an email. Thank you, everybody, and I wish you all success in the exam. And I hope it will be a good experience, and also the preparation, the review for the exam will be a good experience. Bye-bye.